America desperately needs a serious, consequential, and helpful conversation about race. America's not interested. The left, they can't handle it. They want to have a silly one they can exploit, one they can use to enhance their power. They virtue signal, they talk about systemic racism and white supremacy and things that are not the problem, so they can feel good on what? Talk shows, feel good at a party, how virtuous, how hip, how woke they are. But there's an impact far away from where they are on this road in Grand Rapids, Michigan. All that nonsense, all that rhetoric leads to a moment like this, where a police officer's lawful orders are ignored.
Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car! Stay in the car! Get in the car! Dude, I'm stopping you. Do you have a license? Do you have a license?
For what?
I'm stopping you. Do you have a license?
What done?
Do you have a driver's license? Do you speak English?
Yes.
Can I see your license?
What did I do wrong?
What did I do wrong? I mean, if he watches the news, he should be asking these questions, right? I mean, we know how desperately the police need to be reformed. We hear it all the time. A standoff. We have a guy who just got pulled over, not cooperating. This is going to end badly. And the left, I believe, are responsible for moments like this. You know, if Joe Biden, who's been talking about systemic racism for the past 3 years, if he were pulled over, now what do you think he would do? I think he would actually say, hey, I'm Joe Biden. Oh, I got you guys so much money, you're not going to write me a ticket, right? But he would comply. He wouldn't get out of the car first and say, back off. Oh, who knows? Maybe he would. But I don't think he would make that kind of mistake. Then again, he gets driven around everywhere. This is never going to happen to him. But it happens to real people getting pulled over by real cops. And horrible things are happening because of the rhetoric, the propaganda that has come out of the left, that has come from Joe Biden. And yeah, this does get worse. A bad guy with a cop's stun gun, if he steals it, that cop is in serious trouble. What happens if it's used on him? He has a real gun. The guy could take the gun. The cop cannot be incapacitated. He cannot let that happen. There's more struggle. And then this individual, 26-year-old Patrick Loyoya, is going to get shot. He's going to die. It's clearly, to me, a justified shooting, but an unnecessary one. They wouldn't have been in this position at all had the current climate not been the current climate. So what happens next? Protests. There have been some up there in, Black Lives Matter. They're out. They're upset. They're upset. You know, this made me think, actually, of Ashley Babbitt, of all people. So many people think that she deserved to die that day, which is so offensive to me. Was she wrestling with Lieutenant Mike Byrd, trying to grab his gun? No. She wasn't coming at Mike Byrd. She was going in another direction. She had no deal made here. A lot of money. So I was looking at that guy, Patrick Loyoya, as he's standing there, and I was wondering, what kind of media diet does he have? If he just goes around the dial casually, he'll see stuff like this all the time.
Racism is extremely pervasive in America's police departments, and people need to acknowledge that.
We have to admit that this criminal justice system is racist and go from there.
It's time to address systemic racism in this country, racism in policing.
Black people have been routinely and continually subject to inequity and injustice and systemic racism in the policing system of this country.
Unless you make an attempt, a conscious effort to engage conservative media, if you just go with the flow and occasionally turn on the TV, this is what you're going to see, this is what you're going to hear, and this is what you're probably going to believe. We can't talk to Patrick Loyoya anymore, but I wonder, was he thinking about Joe Biden? He heard about how systemically racist police or the country is and our original sin of slavery. Was he thinking about what he heard from the media for the past 2 years? Was he thinking about George Floyd? Now, there was an incredible overreaction to what happened to George Floyd. It damn near ruined this country, or is ruining this country. What was on his mind? I have a feeling all of that stuff led him to not comply. How about the Waukesha Christmas driver, allegedly, this guy, right? Driving into a peaceful parade of people. Clearly, according to his online history, driven by a hatred of white people. The stuff they're talking about on cable, in the West Wing of the White House, it's having a real impact. Not just for crazy people like this, but even commissioned officers of the United States Army pulled over by police. No, you don't get to pull me over. I'm a black man, and you're racist. You're police.
How many occupants are in the vehicle?
What's going on?
How many occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
Open the door slowly and step out. Open the door.
I'm not getting out the vehicle. What's going on?
Get out of the car. Open the door slowly and get out.
What's going on?
Lieutenant Nazario can't be bothered. No. Again, he's clued into the narrative. The police, you got to explain yourselves to me before I do anything. Dangerous stuff, and it's leading to dangerous situations. Now, this guy put himself through a lot if he had only complied. And, of course, they fired the cop. They fired the cop way prematurely, and I hope he gets his job back, and I hope he gets a lot of money because he deserves it. He was unfairly terminated. And that lieutenant, we all saw, he just blew off the cops. He was officially praised by one of the top officials in the Pentagon, in the Department of Defense. This man, the Sergeant Major of the Army, put out an official statement that Lieutenant Nazario, just there, represented himself and our Army well through his calm, professional response. I am very proud of him. Well, that kind of pride is going to get other soldiers killed. It will. It probably already has. And our obsession with January 6th has to stop.
In the aftermath of the attack, the Justice Department began its work on what has become one of the largest, most complex, and most resource-intensive investigations in our history. Only a small number of perpetrators were arrested in the tumult of January 6th itself. Every day since, we have worked to identify, investigate, and apprehend defendants from across the country.
Largest investigation ever, and January 6th, so closely related to white supremacy, right? You saw those guys, all the harm they did, wearing those goofy clothes, yelling, howling at the moon. Very few of them broke anything or hurt anybody. But this is the number one threat. Ask the FBI. It has been for the past year and a half almost. This is it. This is what their official priority is. Number one pinned tweet. The FBI is still seeking information regarding people who committed violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. If they just limited themselves to those who committed violence, they'd be looking for far fewer people. They're not focusing on what's important. And what's important right now, and we've all seen it, especially here in New York, the shooting on the subway, something called BIE, Black Identity Extremism. This is a real thing. It's a real thing. And the FBI, back before it was corrupted, wasn't afraid to talk about this. They put out an official report early 2017. It was well on its way to being corrupt back then, by the way. Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. Do you remember the Dallas attack just the year prior? Several officers were killed by a black radical extremist who hated law enforcement. But as soon as the FBI started talking about black identity extremism, oh no. You can't talk about that. That's not the problem. It's white supremacy. Get with the program. Forget about what's really happening. We want to go after the white supremacists. Remember?
The irony, of course, here is that you have the FBI inventing something that they call black identity extremists. The federal government is targeting Black Lives Matter and calling Black Lives Matter extremists and saying they're black identity extremists. but law enforcement having no interest in arresting white supremacists.
I don't believe that there is such a thing as black identity extremists. I think it's fiction. I think it was made up by the FBI. And
race seems to be the basis of linking these often individual violent acts to groups like Black Lives Matter and echoes the FBI's long history of targeting black activists.
We are being surveilled. We are being criminalized for our protesting and our activism. And we are being targeted.
Well, there is a real thing called black identity extremism. It exists. And let's see the latest black identity extremist. His name is Frank James, and allegedly he shot up that train just the other day.
I keep telling you the same thing. White people and black people, as we call ourselves, should not have any contact with each other. You still refuse to understand this. They hate your f***ing guts. And why do they hate your guts? Because they know that your rightful place is as a slave in this country. They know that.
That's black identity extremism right there. But remember, it's not a thing. And the FBI should not be looking into it. And they didn't look into it. And another one was missed. So that's not extremism. And neither is this. Oh, neither is this, right? This isn't extremism. This isn't violence. This is peaceful protest. This is social justice. What a warped world they want us to live in. Stay with us. Things are getting interesting in prison as transgender individuals cohabitate with female prisoners. Be right back.